What's up, everyone? In this quick video I want to go through the changes that I have made for my geometry along the curve HDA node. The changes stem from me working with the node, needing to copy geometry in the specific way. The actual changes are minor and do not change the overall workflow of the node. I have just added more parameters to handle use cases that I have come across. So let's get to it. So let's go to, and this is kind of the kind of a geometry that I have worked on, and basically I needed a bunch of very specific way of copying this kind of a geometry, and these parameters, these new added parameters have come very useful for me. And also I have changed the collection piece HDA node to be a little bit less confusing. So let's get to the actual geometry on the curve main node. Changes for it. So now for the corners, when you do not have a corner, you can actually go ahead and offset the straight pieces. So let me go ahead and copy this node. So this option, it has been kind of reintroduced from the previous versions of my old HDA node. So the idea is that when we do not have this is going to work only when you do not have a corner. So if this is empty, you can go ahead and offset your straight pieces. So what we do internally, we just move each segment of this geometry of this polyline. Basically, we offset it internally. We just offset these points to make it shorter or longer or whatever. So and how it looks like is like here. So if you go ahead and put it to the 0, this would be kind of your default setup for the corners if you don't have any corner piece like this. But what you can do is go ahead and start offset it like this to match it, and this would kind of connect your beams together for convex and concave corners. So that's actually very useful. And how I'm using it is for this porch. Basically the base, basically the top of the porch would look like this. So this is just very useful. So this is kind of a minor change, but very useful in certain scenarios. And the second thing that I have changed for the geometry along the curve node is ability to force the completion of the pattern. And basically the idea is that when you have your pattern mode on, the pattern could be broken off at any of the pattern piece entries. So let's say we have this polycurve, and when we copy our next geometry pattern piece, the pattern piece exceeds the size of the polyline. That means, and if this piece happens to be at the middle of the pattern, that means that the rest of the pattern would not be copied and it would break off. So this is good when you want to limit the maybe like a stretching of the instance geometry, but it is not good when you want to consistent results. So in this case, I have disabled these new options. So the new options are a force complete pattern and skip last pattern piece. So I have not selected any of these options, and you can see the result looks like this. Since I have my base corner, and my pattern can be broken off at any of the based on the size of the polyline. You can see that in this case, my corner looks good. Corner has been copied, and this is a mesh that I want to actually end and start. So I know that the start is always going to be good because my mesh starts the pattern, but the end can be a little bit less predictable because you can see I have this one. This looks good, but like here you can see when we wrote our pattern, there was enough space for another post from the pattern. So this does not look correct. So this is where the force complete pattern and skip last pattern piece comes in handy. So let me go ahead and say force complete pattern. You can see has not changed anything because our pattern actually ends with the post. So this looks correct. You can see now we have introduced this post at the end of these. At the end of these ones, all of these. So this is okay in the cases when you do not have a corner, like in this case. You see I have selected force complete pattern, and since I do not have a corner, I am actually ending my pattern with this piece that basically acts like a like a corner for this kind of a pattern. So this looks actually pretty good for in this case when you do not have a corner. But when you have a corner, it would be great if we could predictably actually remove the last pattern piece from here to make it match like this. So this is where the skip last pattern piece comes in handy. So this is only available when you have your force complete pattern selected. So if this is deselected, you can see it's going to be grayed out. And if you go ahead and select it, you can see the only thing that we have changed is we have removed the last pattern piece. And this is going to create a predictable result for all of your corners, like here. And yeah, I mean, it's just a very specific way of copying geometry, but it is very useful when you're working with these kind of patterns. So this covers the changes for the main geometry along the curve node. Now let's go very quickly to the collection piece HDA node and things that I have changed in there. So the first of all, the toggle to match the bounding box size has been removed, and now we have kind of a more of a, I guess you would call more of a manual way of setting the size of the geometry and more handles in the viewport. So the idea is that this the toggle from the previous versions, so you can still use the previous version of the geometry on the curve piece HDA node. It doesn't really change the basically doesn't really change anything when we set our attributes. It changes kind of a workflow on how to use it to basically the kind of more handles and parameters that visualize the size and offset of the pieces. So you can still use the last version because we just set attributes inside here, and the attributes has not changed from the previous version of the tool. But the thing that has changed is I have removed the automatic size setting of the size from the bounding box, because geometry can be very varied, and many of the times you want your little bit of overlap for your geometry pieces, and then the bounding box doesn't really make sense for you to use as a size as for the size of the piece. So the idea is that you can go ahead and enter the viewport, and you have now two handles that you can go ahead and manually align your geometry piece size like this. So this has been changed, and there's also buttons for you to set up automatically bounding boxes. Basically, it's going to set up these parameters automatically for you to match the size of the bounding box. So this would be like a good starting position for you to start setting the size of the geometry pieces. And you also have ability to make it a half automatically. So you can see it's basically bounding box size, Z size, and it's half of it, like this. And once you have set it, since there's no more like a relative bounding box expression, you can go ahead and then manually adjust the size as much as you want. And so this is actually not too bad, because once we have set it up one time, this doesn't really have to be changed anymore once you have set your sizes correctly, something that suits you. So this is kind of a setting of the size has been updated, and also the offset. So when you have a corner, you need your offset. And let's take a look at this. So the offset again has been improved. I mean, at least I think so. So one thing that you can now have a handle 1D handle, which basically changes the offset in one dimension, or a 2D handle, which is kind of a more of an original way of setting up the offset. So the offset is important for corner pieces, and the previous version was actually pretty confusing, since you had this 2D handle, which was really kind of initially thought for me. It was used for kind of a curved angle pieces to better see the exact size of it. So that was fine for those pieces, but a lot of the times your pieces are actually much more simpler. And what you can do is you can now use a 1D handle for the more straightforward pieces. What you can do is setting your bounding box plus and negative size. Which basically you see that it's going to check the sizes on the positive x and negative x size bounding box and set them here. And once you have set them, you can actually go ahead and adjust them with this handle, with the new handle that I have also added for when you're in the 1D mode. You can take a look at it if you set bounding box plus x size and negative. You can see it basically just changes this parameter. Only thing this does. And then you can just go ahead and use the handle to change it. And then you can also use a 2D handle. And the 2D handle is your previous use case scenario when you set your size. And then the handle is actually going to be starting from the size, from the setting, basically from the size line. Your offset will be set from here. So this is good for those curved geometry pieces when you are not really sure what's the size of the geometry pieces for your corner piece. So this is still available in just under the 2D option. But most of the time you can actually use the 1D for simpler geometry pieces. And also these fonts should now actually not interfere with each other. I have basically offset them a bit to make it a little bit more straightforward. So yeah, but internally this doesn't really change anything. Basically the setting of the attributes is basically the same still. And this is going to cover the changes for the geometry along the curve HDA node. So it's not a big update, but it is still very useful parameter that I think it's going to be useful for some of you out there. Okay, that's it for this video and see you next time.